So hi there and welcome to another episode of Ronan Nazarene Talks. I'm one of your hosts, Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films.
And I'm the other one. I'm the idiot of the two idiots.
Fair enough. And today we're going to talk about two films by arguably the greatest writer, director, producer combination ever. I think that's hyperbole, probably is. Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, collectively known as the Archers. And we're going to talk about the 1943 film The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and the 1947 film Black Narcissus.
I'll go even further. They're the greatest direct and basically the greatest export from Britain in film history. I don't care what you Hitchcock fans say, these are better. Just start out and say, like, if you're a Hitchcock fan, you're just...
For me, Michael Powell is the greatest British director of all time.
Yeah.
And it's not even close.
Yeah. I would actually rate McKendrick above Hitchcock as well, even though most people wouldn't, but I would. Yeah. I'd rate quite a few films above Hitchcock. So maybe we'll bash Hitchcock straight away. No, I'm kidding. We're kidding. We're just teasing. Don't run away.
I'll bash Hitchcock. Hitchcock is a very good technician.
Yeah, but we think that Michael Powell and Pressburger are artists. We are big fans.
Yes. So do you want to give an introduction to 1943? Is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp? Sum it up.
Yeah. I'll get the title right as well.
Yes.
So The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is... I should start out and say I'm very biased in this film. This is it's probably one of my top 10 films. This is one of the top 10 films for me. This is a film I adored straight away as soon as I saw it. It instantly became... I think it was a gateway film for me for Paul Pressburger. I'd seen one or two other ones before this, but this one was the one that just kind of knocked my socks off, and that was me into them as the great directing force. So it's the story of a military man, and it runs from the Boer Wars in Africa to World War II. So it's going between wars, from the African Wars to World War I, to World War II, and it's a story of a man who starts off as a young upstart who's getting in trouble, and it takes you through his life, going from this to a more conservative type of person who's been in power for a while. So he's he knows the system, to being someone who's become out of date by the time we get to World War II. And it's like, how does that process happen? What happened to that guy, from this guy who was trying to change the world to somebody who was viewed as an embarrassment? And it was based on a comic series by David Lowe, who was all about the British colonels who were all out of sorts and who didn't have a clue what the new war was about. But the film actually goes into the process of what created the change in the guy, and also the British structure of how the British class structure changed the guy, and all the experiences. And it shows you his friendships that have evolved through time. It shows you his good points, his bad points. But it's a very much a story of a life, of a very sympathetic look at a life, because this guy actually is a very decent guy, as you find out pretty quickly. And it's, even though the nickname is Colonel Blimp, it's a very heartfelt film. So is that good enough?
Yes. Thanks for joining us. That's because we're introduced by bookends. We start in 1943, and then it goes back in a wonderful transition back to 1903, 1902, and then it comes full circle at the end of the film. This film was kind of butchered, and those bookends were kind of cut off, and it was shown in chronological order. And it is it's another example of why Scorsese is actually in some ways more important as a restoration figure. He was friends with Michael Powell. He was kind of on the vanguard of getting Michael Powell films, Pressburger films, back into consciousness and helping to get them restored, because both these films on Blu-ray now are absolutely gorgeous. And he was one of the forefronts of the restoration of the life and death of Colonel Blimp to get it back to the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I've never seen it any other way though. That's the thing.
No,
I saw it when the restoration happened. I was the first time I saw it, and
yeah.
So I'll only ever know it as what it is.
Yeah. Again, it's a controversial film at the time. Churchill was not a fan of it because he just viewed it as criticising and being anti-war, or not anti-war, but anti the British point of view. Again, it was made in 1943. There is some amazing lines in it.
Yeah.
Pretty much regarding Britain took 5 years to realise who Hitler was. So Churchill wasn't a fan of it.
Yeah, the thing was, it actually showed you the complexity of the situation. I mean, I think to not be a fan of it suggests you never even saw it properly, because it's because it's just showing the complexity, and it actually states how horrible the Nazis are. It just says we have to change this. This is what we have to change.
Yeah, I'm guessing probably some of his aides saw it and then told him it was so terrible and it needs to be.
It was reacting, I think, also to the cartoon, which was much more brutal about the British. It was the idea of making a film about this cartoon. I think it was. So you don't really. I'm not quite sure how he actually saw it, but it's probably not a very good press thing for the British Army.
No. See, again, if you were only making a film about Win Candy at the end of his life, then obviously he's a bit of a blowhard. You know, he's obviously overweight. We don't know how he's kind of got here. Yes, he's a caricature, but because we do go back in time, we see him, we see the kind of person he is. He is a character that you do root for and adore, and it's the tragedy of the fact that he is out of touch at the end, and he has to change. Whereas if it's right, if you only saw him at the end of his life, then you would think he's a caricature, and it's like a blowhard.
But it's how he became that, and it's a very sympathetic thing. And it actually shows you it's not a simple set of factors. It's like, this is what happens. And the thing that's always brought up is everyone always talks about the last war. Because he goes through 3 wars, and every time he runs into someone, he tells them his experiences, they always act as if that other war didn't count. This is the real war.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone's always ready to say their war is a great war. And it's like, there's that kind of sense of everyone's always like doing press of their own achievements, always.
Yeah, he runs into some American soldiers in World War One, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I haven't heard of the Boer War," and "Oh yeah, that was just country manoeuvres. That wasn't a proper war."
Yeah, and World War One wasn't a proper war compared to World War Two.
Yeah,
and it's like there's that thing that comes in is like the changing times. That's my thing. The film is about changing times and dealing with the youth of today and mistakes they're going to make.
Yeah.
So that's a big theme of it. It's like it's easy to look down an older generation, but what mistakes are your generation going to make? Because you see his generation make mistakes, and then the future generations of World War One make mistakes that lead to World War Two. And it's like each generation makes mistakes based on assumptions of they know best. And they never do. They're actually like as flawed as anyone else. Each generation has its flaws. So it's a very humane film about it.
Yeah, because he says to the character at the start, you know, in 40 years' time, you'll have a fat stomach as well. And it's like, and he says, "Oh yeah, but I won't make the same mistakes you will." And it's like, chances are you probably will.
Yeah, because I mean, he's not much different from who Clive Candy was. You know, a blowhard who wanted to upset everything to you because he felt that his view was right. And that's what we see. That's how he meets Theo, who is played by Anton Walbrook. I mean, should say something away, the act in this film is amazing.
Yes.
I mean, Roger Lively's Clive Candy is wonderful. Anton Walbrook's Theo is wonderful. Deborah Kerr in 3 different parts is wonderful. Everyone in the 3 very different parts. She looks the same, but they're 3 different people.
Yes.
So it's not just her playing the same reflection of a person throughout the 3 parts of the film. No, it's 3 different people.
And again, you know, it's over 70 years old, and it really hasn't aged that well. Again, sorry, it hasn't aged that badly. Sorry,
I was a bit slappy there for that one.
Yeah, it's like, and again, it speaks to Pressburger and his scripts, again, most of their films weren't that appreciated at the time, but Pressburger's scripts are just so good that they don't age badly, like quite a lot of kind of films from the 30s and 40s do, because these scripts are just phenomenal.
What the film does is just show you the sense of time passing and how it affects a person, as well as what people don't notice is how it affects the person and how their own like social upbringing affects them in ways they don't realize. Like Clive Candy doesn't realize how much of how part of the society he grew up in he actually is. He thinks he's a rebel against society. He's a soldier, but he thinks to him the British society still a thing needs defended, or sprints democracy over the world and all the rest of it. He's all into it. So he doesn't like them being bad-mouthed, and he's just seen the good side of his nation. He's not really seen the dark side. And that's the kind of thing that is his kind of sort of character flaw. He's not really someone who sees the darker side of things.
Yeah, he is an eternal optimist. You know, at the end of World War One, when he has Teo over with all these army buddies, they're all saying, you know, we'll help Germany rebuild and it'll be fine and you'll go back to your country and everything will be great. And of course, obviously that wasn't the case, but he just has that eternal optimism of, you know, oh, the war's over, we're friends now again, you know, there's no grudges.
And Theo's much more like he's more realistic. He knows what it's actually about, the kind of dark side of it all, the social side of it all. Like he's the kind of realist, and he kind of gets the brunt of the wars more than Clive ever does, because he's the one who sees the wars for what they are, which is brutality. You know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when Candy never really obviously sees that, but we don't see him seeing that. So it's kind of, he just thinks of it again as a sport, as a game, you know, there's rules. You know, he doesn't see, like you say, the brutality of it.
Even in World War One, he knows it's bad. He knows understands it's like in World War One, he's probably the most realistic he ever gets, because he's in the trenches for those 4 years. He sees it's bad. He doesn't agree with anyone getting tortured, but he is like a middle-aged soldier then, and he's a soldier, so he isn't like distance as much as he is in World War
he's
II.
Trying to, you know, interrogate the prisoners, and he's just pretty much asking them questions, and as soon as he leaves, you can see like the South African guys obviously going to use other methods.
Yeah,
he's just like asking them and going, come on, I'm asking you. It's just like a completely different
he's kind of like the old Britain, and the other stuff is going to be hid, but he's kind of representative of how they think they're fighting the war, and he's like, but he's not like stupid or anything. It's just that he's got an old-fashioned point of view. He is a optimist. He does believe the best in people. That's his kind of downfall. He does not see the darker side of things.
Which even just shows you simple people's motivations, even in why he's got a moustache.
Yeah.
Because obviously the guy, you know, it's a Private Wilson or Sergeant Wilson, whoever he is, at the start, who's obviously belittling him and going, you know, I hope I won't have time to grow as big a bushy moustache as you. And he's like, well, you don't even know why I've got this moustache.
Yeah, no, that's really complicated. It shows you the complications of a life. And it's like, yes, even though he's an optimist, he's not blind optimist. He gets more blind as he goes on, but even there he learns from it. It's not like an idea or anything. He's got a set of values that he holds dear, and sometimes that keeps him back. And Theo's much more of a realist, but that we also see the downside of that. It's like sometimes Theo is more cynical in a way that's not healthy for him either. So it's you're seeing the duality of the cynicism and the beauty of being more optimistic. It's like it's both sides of human nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the great scenes in the film, which has many great scenes, you know, at the end when he's been taken off active service because he doesn't understand the kind of Nazi methodology, and he still thinks, you know, if you play by the rules, And of course, Theo's just like, there are no rules, and if you lose this one, there's no like rematch next week.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful scene.
Yeah, also Theo in the scene where he's interrogated, he becomes he comes to the country as a refugee. The thing we should also say about the Theo's story as well, so it's not confusing for anybody who hasn't seen it. But most people watch this will have seen it. Theo starts out as a guy who climbed duels in Germany early on. They have a duel, but we don't see the duel. You see this, the build up to it, but you don't see the duel. They both get injured. As a convalescent, they start to become friends because they play cards, and this is where the person who brought Clive over, she falls in love with Theo, and Theo falls in love with her, and she's British, and she stays with him and falls in love with him. And then as he leaves, Clive realizes he's in love with her as well, but it's too late. Then Theo, in this World War One, is a prisoner of war for like 2 years. He's a prisoner of war camp. And he meets up with Clive at the end of the war, and Clive's trying to cheer him up. And he's crestfallen because his career's over, his life's over, and he's the representative of the reality of the losing side of a war. And he comes from a proud warrior class, the Germans, which is established in the first section of the film. So this is almost a downfall of the German culture, this film. Just showing the proud nation they were, how they fell into hubris and were beaten, and how that led to the Nazis, really, and how the Nazis. So in the third section, he comes as a refugee. His wife has died. His sons have become Nazis, and everything he's believed in has been ruined, and he has to learn how to live with that. So he's another character who has to learn to live with failure and follow his ideals, which are different ideals from what Clive represents, but they're ideals of a Germany that has certain kind of class that has fallen, really.
Yeah, and then in World War II, when he's older and seeking refuge, in one of the greatest speeches in cinema history that nobody talks about, he just wants to come to his wife's country. He got nostalgic for it, and then he's like turned down.
Yeah, but then Clive comes in and sorts it all out, kind of.
But that's another masterstroke of the film. It's constantly playing with your expectations.
Yeah.
And Powell is deliciously playing with those.
Well, I think it's Pressburger. Pressburger's the writer of the two.
Yeah.
And
from a visual standpoint as well, Powell.
Yeah, I know. But I think Powell gets a lot of praise, but Pressburger sometimes is forgotten because the structure of these scripts are really good. They're so well structured and so well delivered, and there's nuances throughout. So these are like craftsmanship for writing. These are some of the best scripts. Some of the dialogue's amazing, and Powell respects that. So he's visually great, but he allows Pressburger's writing to strut as well.
Yeah, it was a true collaboration because you have this perfect mix of Pressburger from having an outside view of Britain and Englishness and Britishness, Michael Powell being on the surface a quintessential English gentleman, but obviously he had these little perversities and kinks. And it's just that perfect combination of the two.
Yeah.
So they could look at Win Candy in a loving manner, but also see the flaws of the military and the Foreign Office and bureaucracy and everything.
And institutions that are built around it, and the things that built up as have risen have become the liabilities as have fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also you can see the depth of Theo, but also the liability of Theo as well. He's not viewed as the good German, he's viewed as a German of his culture who makes mistakes.
Again, at the end of the First World War, when he's bitter and they're going back in the train, he's just like ripping Win Candy and his friends for their attitude of, there's a pat in the back and we'll sort Germany out and you'll all be fine.
Yeah, and it's
not portrayed, like you say, as this perfect, good German all the time.
I know, but he learns from his flaws, same as when Clive Candy also learns from his mistakes as he goes on. I mean, that's the thing. I think the balance of those two, the Pressburger and Powell, the balance of them understood each other's virtues really helps. Because I mean, that's the big thing. How Scorsese and Schrader used to be partnership.
Yeah.
And then it fell away. And it's like Scorsese really needed Schrader, and Schrader needed Scorsese, and they really needed each other. And it's a shame they couldn't have worked it out because it's like they're lesser without each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of partnerships lose that from ego, and it's like you really should know what's good with the other person and stop.
Yeah, Powell and
things.
Pressburger are the best at that.
Yeah, they really know what they're doing. And this film, this is definitely my favourite of their films. I mean, there's other films I really adore as well. I mean, pretty much the 40s and 50s, there's so many great films. They've been knocking them out. Even their minor films were amazing. But this was this is one of the big films. This is one of the, I guess, this is the one that kind of got people to look up and see them, because around then they were doing stuff like Wonder About Crafts Missing, which were a few just kind of smaller films. But this is what set them up towards going towards Red Shoes and A Matter of Life and Death, things like that. It was like, this was the kind of first kind of, with the fantastical elements kind of really started to grow beyond just the really good observation of English and British life.
From 41 to 49, they go on an amazing tear.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much unmatched. And again, you have to remember what other people were doing at the time. Powell and Pressburger were just in a league of their own. They were just doing stuff that other people weren't really doing. Yeah.
I mean, we should pretty much say that Hammer ripped them off royally for the style for the Hammer films, the early Hammer films. They were obviously influenced by Powell Pressburger.
Yeah.
They really were. And it's like, at least someone was. At least someone noticed how good it was. It was like, oh, we're having some of that.
I mean, the cinematography in the films of Chalice and Jack Cardiff were just like stunning. I mean, they truly are colour films and taking advantage of colour.
Yeah, and it was an easy partnership because, I mean, apparently Powell was hard to honour sometimes. He's a perfectionist. Yeah. And Cardiff didn't like him much.
Well, sometimes geniuses are hard to get along with.
I know.
As you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, there are some insanity. I mean, this film, because it's about a man's life and back and forth in time, does resemble Citizen Kane. It's a much warmer film. I actually think it's a much better film than Citizen Kane. This is a warmer, and get a bit more piercing look.
It's better than Citizen Kane.
I mean, I like Citizen Kane a lot, but it's not my favourite Welsh film. And this one just feels warmer and more decent, and I think it'll last longer ultimately because it's about a period in time. It's about culture through one man's life, but it tells you a lot of the culture around it. And there's nice things like the fact that the guy who was his driver in World War One becomes his butler, basically. Yeah. And even though they abuse each other, Candy's obviously very fond of him. Yeah. And he kind of uses him almost as a reality basis sometimes to try and... Because he tells Candy what's what sometimes, which he needs.
And then he would end up in Dad's army.
Yeah. Well, this one sets up Dad's army.
It's canon to Dad's army.
Yeah, it's the Dad's army. It's inferior sequel.
Yes. But again, it's such a great film, and again, I just love the way it does play against the expectations. For example, you think when Candy's going to end up with Deborah Kerr's Miss Hunter, the governess who brought him over to Germany at the start of the film. But of course, she ends up with Theo. Obviously, the duel is one of the most famous scenes. We go into the ritual of it, we go into the rules of it, we go into the codex and all the preparation, and then we just see the brief beginning of it, and then it's just an amazing crane shot out of the building.
Do you think that Kubrick was influenced by that? Because in Barry Lyndon, the preparation was more important than the duel itself as well.
Yeah,
I think Barry Lyndon was definitely influenced by this one.
Well, the duel in Barry Lyndon's influenced by this and by Leone as well.
Yeah, but I think because this one's more the kind of British or European kind of tradition, there was... I think it was probably closer because it was a bit sometimes insane traditions that are very masculine and very weird. and it's kind of a
And
way
the
of
whole
keeping
thing of,
class.
the Germans being proud of their scars, whereas
Yeah.
obviously it just
It shows you the kind of society that's slowly evolving into something that's going to become much, much worse. This kind of militarism and fetishization of militarism that in the German soul that actually becomes something that becomes absolutely horrible over time. And it shows them the British side of it, where they've also got their stupid things, but they never go in that direction. They have their problems at the Boer Wars and stuff. They have their wars, they have their stupidities, but they never quite go in that kind of seediness and nastiness that the Germans go in. They've got there's kind of there's a different attitude to life.
Yeah, and again, when they go to the prisoner of war camp at the end of World War One to see Teo again, the audience expectation is, they'll have a big reunion, and of course Teo ignores them. At the end of the film, we think, Teo's going to get into the country and Wing Candy's going to save him, but he doesn't. He's still called an illegal alien, and he has to leave eventually. So it's just constantly playing with your expectations.
Yeah, no, I mean, basically he's in the country, but he has to sit waiting at home,
Yeah, and there's curfews and
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think my assumption is he'll probably die before he's ever sent home, because they're both pretty old at that point. And it's like one of those things is like, he's got a connection, but he's still forced to be there during the war. But it's still that kind of thing, it's a compromise that actually is quite interesting. And you get the sense of he understands why that's happening. Like he doesn't know better towards the British for it. It's like he understands it. He's not like Clive Candy's probably more upset than Theo is about it.
Yeah,
really.
And then you have Deborah Carr, who's fantastic.
Yeah.
As a governess, and then as a nun, which we'll find out a bit later. Who ends up being Wing Candy's wife.
She's not a nun.
Sorry, a nurse. Sorry, nurse. Just in a convent.
I was thinking you're obsessed with nuns.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with nuns. It's a convent.
And it's one of those things. Best to send a psychiatrist and let him figure it out for himself.
Yes. And then as his driver, who's a much more spunky character. But it's great turns with Deborah Carr as well.
Yeah, she has to feed very different characters because they do feel different people. They don't feel like the same person. Yeah. Like the first one, she's pretty much a proto-feminist. She's like, she wants to go out to the world and change things and be different and experience things. The second, the one who becomes Candy's wife, she's also adventurous, but she's probably more at home with her family as well. She's a different feeling to her. She's not quite as obviously feminist and obviously adventurous. But once she marries him, she goes on the world with him. But she wouldn't have done it by herself.
Yeah, she does have a great line at the prisoner of war camp about how the Germans write wonderful literature and write wonderful music, and then they go to war, and then after the war, they just go back and sit down and listen to great music again.
Yeah. And the third one, Johnny, she's kind of just like a normal person in the war. She's working class. She's just on with it. And it just shows you kind of how the role of women slowly evolve through time in this world. When the first ever character is, she's more rarefied, a woman in a workplace. That's how difficult it is to find work for them. And the second one, it's the nurses. It's just like part of the job. They're in the workplace a lot more. And the third one, it's just, that's a job. It's just a change in attitude over time, which is slowly shown. Plus, I think the romantic thing of Clive not getting over it, that love, is a wonderful part of the film. It shows you a much softer side to him. It is an emotional attachment that you can understand.
Yeah.
It is kind of the heart of the film in a weird way.
Yeah, because you feel for him and you root for him.
Yeah, even though it's doomed, there's nothing they can do about it. It's not. But it shows you the kind of softer side to him, the kind of romantic side to his character.
Yeah. And
how kind of he finds it hard earlier on to admit to emotions, but slowly over time you start to see how his emotions actually work. And as a very sympathetic show of that kind of era of man's emotions. And it also suggests that the older generation who he butted heads against to start weren't that much different from him, so you don't know what their stories were, but they probably weren't that different, really. He's become the guy who he butted heads with, really. And the big story is what will happen next generation, because it had been changing over time.
Because they'll just make the same mistakes.
Yeah. As you can probably tell, I'm a massive super fan of this film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
Yes.
Yeah, anybody who doesn't like Life and Death of Colonel Blimp needs character reassessment.
They need to be shot. They need to be shot, basically. Put against the wall and shot.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm very sane about this film.
Yeah, I mean, it is phenomenal, and it just flies by. Great performances, looks great, sounds great, amazing script, and has lots of great points, which sadly are still relevant.
Yeah, and it's also almost 3 hours long. It doesn't feel it. You don't feel the time pass, because the first section takes about an hour 20. It's almost a full film in itself, the first section, and you don't notice it because you actually realize later that nothing much happens. It's just the duel setup and the friendship setup. The first section's almost as long as Black Narcissus.
Yeah.
But you don't notice it because it's so well done and it's so well choreographed and
the way Powell uses the passage of time, because in between wars, when Candy's out shooting things,
I know.
So again, the quick cuts of the heads on the wall. He also uses magazine covers at one point. He uses photo albums at one point, just for the passage of time.
Yeah, that would
be years between wars.
Yeah, that would be done well now, but that's just the way they were then. It's just like that's life.
Yeah.
That was just his culture. That's what he did. He's a military guy in a certain culture. That's what he did. That was it. He never understood anything wrong with that. It was just that's what you do. You go on.
Yeah. I mean, because lots of people, were probably guilty of this as well, throwing the word masterpiece about. But I mean, this is a film that's been around for 70 years, and it's a masterpiece in every sense of the word.
Yeah, it is just a beautifully wonderful film. And again, you can't stress enough how good the transfer is. The new transfer,
yeah, it's
beautiful.
Funny.
So you have no excuse. You just have to go and buy this film on Blu-ray. If you don't own it, buy it. It's just so good. It's just worth your time. It's a wonderful film. It is a masterpiece. It is one of the greatest films ever made. Yeah. And it is the ultimate film about Britain in the first half of the 20th century, but what it actually was, not what you thought it was. This is what it was. This is how it saw itself. And its flaws and its flaws and its beauties.
Yeah.
And the final moments are amazing in this film. The final moments are heartbreaking. So this is... we could talk about this one for hours quite easily, but we're trying to restrain ourselves.
And like I said, it contains arguably one of the greatest speeches in cinema history that nobody talks about by Antoine Walbrook. It's just stunning. And Powell just lets the camera sit there. He doesn't do any pyrotechnics or anything. He just lets the camera sit there. It's amazing.
Yeah, and he does that a lot with actors. Once he trusts his actors, I mean, Roger Lives, this is a performance of his lifetime. Yeah. And a lot of time, Powell just lets the camera sit on him and lets him act rather than any craziness. And it's weird, you see him as a young man and an old man. He's a young, thin man. And it's the same actor in the same year just shooting this whole film with lots of prosthetics on him. And he does feel very much like a young man and an old man. You don't see the joint. It's just like slowly you see this figure emerge. And the thing was, it was meant to be Laurence Olivier who played him, but it was one of those great casting things where they couldn't get Laurence Olivier because the British Army wouldn't let him out. Because he hated the idea of this film. So they got someone who was actually more perfect for the film, who was just great for this film.
Everybody's perfect. It's just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So, I don't know how long we've been on with this film, but it's probably a while.
Yes. It's just wonderful.
So, will you talk about Black Narcissus then? Black Narcissus. And try not go on as long as I did about this first one.
Well, Black Narcissus is a simple story from 1947 about a group of nuns headed by Deborah Carr's sister Clodagh, who's getting her first job as being a superior.
I
And
was joking about, you can go in as long as you want. So I was joking.
And they go to this place in the Himalayas, which was previously a house of women, and it's now going to be a house of slightly different women.
Yep.
And during the duration of the film, strange things start happening as far as the area, the wind, which you can almost feel in the film. It's Windorama that was shot in. And they slowly go slightly mental.
Yeah.
That's essentially the synopsis.
Yeah.
But
pretty much.
Strange enough, not shot in the Himalayas.
No, it's shot in a studio, but lots of like painted backdrops and everything else, and it looks beautiful. I mean, when I said the Hammer ripped off Paul Pressburger, I'm not at this film. They ripped this off for all the Draculas. They just completely stole from it wholesale.
Yeah, because Michael Powell, there's a wonderful commentary on one of the releases with Scorsese and Michael Powell. And Michael Powell said, we could have went on location, but he thought it would be more of a challenge to see if they could actually pull it off in a studio. And yes, they do.
It looks amazing. Plus, it's a psychological film, so you need that.
Yeah, there's a few shots in like Kew Gardens, I think, or one of the gardens, but everyone else is studio, and it looks amazing. And again, that kind of artificiality actually lends itself to the psychological stuff that's going on.
Yeah. And we should point out Catherine Byron is amazing as the nun that goes absolutely crazy.
Catherine Byron, who had a small part in A Matter of Life and Death, and a couple others. I think she was in Small Back Room. She is. I can't really think of a performance in 1947 or even anywhere near that is like this. She is completely just goes for it.
Yeah, she doesn't care about going over the top. She goes full mania of someone going mad and is.
Yes.
But she's scary. She's really scary.
It's basically nuns go mad for a sensuous wind and David Farrar's hairy knees.
Yeah, it's knee porn. This is the closest Michael Powell ever got to pornography.
Yes, I mean, Michael Powell said he didn't view it as an erotic film, merely an earthy film. But David Farrar with his floppy hat and his which they all ride these tiny little horses, so it's just this wonderful as well. All the nuns go crazy, especially Sister Ruth, Catherine Byron's character, and it's that friction between Sister Clodagh, Deborah Carr's character, over this perceived or real feelings for David Farrar that kind of just set it on fire.
It's almost like Sister Ruth is her doppelganger. It's her.
Yeah, it's her sexual side.
Just coming out. Because those two hate each other, but it's almost like they're always shot as if they're the same person because they resemble each other as well. So sometimes you get confused. Which one is that again? Because they look very similar until you see how crazy the eyes are. If it's crazy eyes, it's Catherine Byron.
Yeah, I mean, there's amazing close-ups later on of almost Sergio Leone close-ups of her eyes near the end of the film that are just amazing. It's just all the nuns start getting feelings that they haven't had before. Deborah Carr, who's forgotten about her romance back in Ireland, she gets visions of that. Other nuns, great scene. One of them is supposed to be planting vegetables and starts planting flowers, and it's just
and one of them it just becomes more emotional. She's always emotional, but it becomes more emotional, tries to help out, and it causes havoc.
Yeah,
you get a young Gene Simmons and Indian face.
Yeah.
She's but she's this young woman who is so sensual, and she ends up seducing the son of the guy in charge of the area.
Yeah, played wonderfully by Sabu.
Yeah, who's just trying to be a good man, an educated man. He's trying to. Again, another thing of Michael Pressburger, people who are trying to get above where they came from to try and advance. And in this case, he realizes he's not really as advanced as he thought.
Yeah.
You know. But when Gene Simmons and doing those kind of weird dances she's doing, though, we can understand why he succumbed. Because
Based on
this
based
is
on a
his,
book.
sorry.
Why you go?
So this is as close as you can get to slutty without being actually slutty, but it feels weird.
Yeah.
It feels like there's something going on. It's obviously sexualized, but it's a weird sort of classy sluttiness that Michael Pell managed to pull off of Gene Simmons. I don't know how they did it, but it's amazing.
Yeah, for 1947, it's
This would have been the favorite film of any pervert of 1947.
Yes.
You know, just for Gene Simmons.
It was based on a book that Pressburger brought to Powell, and that's how it kind of started.
Yeah, basically, you had Gene Simmons for the guys and David Ferrara's knees for the women.
Yes. David Ferrara's in his shorts. There's one scene where he's topless and they're surrounded him and they're chatting to him. Obviously very distracting. David Ferrara's a wonderful actor who was never really interested in being a star. Obviously, he was the lead in Small Back Room, which is probably their most underrated film. But he was just one of those guys who wasn't really that bothered about being a star. He had other interests, but he's fantastic in this.
The character's good also because he hates himself and he's cynical. And is that kind of post? Is that kind of just from a post-war, just people who are just burnt out? And he's a kind of sense of, even though it's not taking place post-war, is that kind of sensation of some people, all people have felt at that time, just that kind of burnt out
he's
character.
Just landed in this strange place, and he is almost, he can do what he likes. You know, he has no morals particularly. He's just giving them all away, and it's just beautiful.
You could do a whole film with that guy.
Yeah.
Quite easily. Because as a really interesting character. But he's just a small part of the film, but he comes in and out of it just to tempt the women and make them slowly go
blasphemous
crazy.
Things to get a rise out of Deborah Kerr.
Which is fun as hell because he just enjoys torturing her verbally.
Yes.
And she's so easily offended to start because she's so into what she's become that she's kind of lost some of her humanity.
And needless to say, Deborah Kerr is fantastic in this.
Yeah.
Because you can tell she's on the verge of breaking at any point.
I know. Plus, she looks really hot in that outfit, and it's...
Yes, when her sister Ruth just completely breaks. Explodes.
But she's like the repressed version of that, and it's like... when Michael Pell says it's not sexually, it's like, yeah, it is. It really is. Because I was watching it, I know what I was thinking.
Because it does have the most kind of flagrant use of lipstick in cinema history.
I know.
Taunting her with lipstick.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a film responsible for most guys thinking nuns are sexy.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's not the reality of nuns. This is a fantasy version of nuns.
I mean, it's a difficult film to talk about as far as, you know, plot, because there's not that much plot. It's all atmosphere. It's all psychological. It's all in the relationship and the characters.
It's kind of a novella kind of plot. It's not really a plot.
Yeah, it's not.
It's like things happen, but it's all about how
beats or anything. It's just kind of
the plot developments are someone gets a bit sick or someone plants flowers rather than potatoes. Yeah. That's a plot.
Yeah.
But there's just amazing scenes of Gene Simmons dancing in that blue room. That blue room's amazing.
Yeah, production design is just off the charts.
I know. There's that crazy housekeeper who is utterly mental, who's just like...
Yes. You could argue she's a little bit too much, but...
it kind of works because she's obviously away. She's been there for too long. She's away with it. I think if she wasn't so bizarre, it wouldn't have worked as well. You needed that sense of, this is where everyone's going who stays here.
Yeah, because she's lived through the house when it was full of other kinds of women.
Yeah.
And she's just happy to have like women back at the start before she realizes what kind of women they are.
She's nuts. She's completely nuts. She's gone.
But maybe she's, you know, just let the place and that wonderful wind just take her over.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much she's sort of like Jack Nicholson in Shining. That kind of crazy. He loves being there. And she's the same. you know, like years later, you're probably seeing a picture of her in there as if she's a ghost or something. It's like that kind of feeling. Again, a Kubrick thing, you feel he probably saw this film for The Shining.
Yeah.
It just feels like he saw this film for The Shining. It just feels that kind of influence of the idea of horror and the bright daylight. It's kind of horror movie, but it's daylight and nothing actually happens, but a lot of emotions are there.
Scorsese actually makes a good point on the commentary where he thinks of it as a Disney horror film, basically, because Disney always had that kind of scary scene with, you know, the evil queen or whatever, and he kind of felt you get that feeling with Black Narcissus as well.
Yeah,
Catherine Byron obviously being the nutter.
Yeah, because it's obviously influencing something like Suspiria. Really, obviously influenced Suspiria.
Yeah.
And as I was watching both these films, thinking Brian De Palma, I always do as a big Pill fan, but we watch these films like so many of these short movies, the way his vocabulary is, it's much more like Michael Pill than it is Hitchcock. Just the way he shoots stuff, and it's like he was obviously massively influenced by these films as
and the
well.
set piece at the ending, that whole kind of 10-minute section is just absolute.
I don't see Hitchcock doing anything half as good as some of that stuff.
No,
because it's emotional and it's suspenseful. It's not just the mechanics of it. There's an emotion to it that's really powerful. And but it's not about the end.
Yeah, and Deborah Carr's expression in her face at the end is just amazing.
Yeah, and it's just the pure craziness of the whole thing. And I think there's a much better film and stuff that came later about crazy women like The Haunting or something. It's a much stronger film because it's not literally a ghost. It's just the feelings that's floating through this house. It's not a literal haunting, but there's a sense of the kind of craziness in their minds.
I mean, if it was shot in Windorama, audiences would be screaming out the cinemas.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. It's just so well done, but it's a film, but its genre is so hard to define.
Yeah,
it's not really a drama because it's not after the dramatic stuff. It's not really a romance. It's not really anything. It's just a Pearl Pressburger film. It's just this weird thing that's obviously their film, but doesn't fit into anything because there's a horror element and there's other stuff, but it's not just that though. There's something else going on.
Yeah.
Just the same way, Blimp's not really a biography. It's something else. It takes the feelings of a biography, but it doesn't really do a biography because it's based on a fake person, so you can do it at once.
Yeah, I mean, both these films are just masterpieces for me in every level. I often say Black Narcissus is my favourite Pearl Pressburger, but again, it kind of does change every now and again depending which ones you watched, essentially.
Yeah, the big thing with this one is you actually have to see it in a projection though, because I've only ever saw it before on a TV, and it's not the same. No. You have to see it projected because you're losing a lot. Because for me, this was one of the smaller films before until I saw it projected. I was like, oh, this is really good. This is something. It just wasn't a film I connected with until I saw it again for this video because it was
essentially just all in one place and it's all set in like 2 or 3 rooms.
But the massive rooms though, they're really gothic feeling to them. It's not particularly gothic. It's been set up in a certain way that it's not just one. It's not particularly one style. It's like because the outside of it looks more old-fashioned, but inside feels very modern and very much like a new world opening up.
The inside of the wee church is just awesome. You know, when they shoot at night in their rooms, it's just Jack Cardiff cinematography is just stunning.
It's also good because it's clash of cultures. The older culture, they have to put their like Christian methodology over what was already painted, which are very much more vulgar, paganistic. So it's two different cultures coming together. So it's not one is not dominating. So it creates this weird mix of light and imagery that's not one thing or other. So it creates this sort of unique sense to it.
Yeah, and the stuff that's shot in Ireland with Deborah Carr fishing in the water is just like absolutely beautiful as well.
Yeah. So I mean, have you ever understood why Deborah Carr was a big star? You have to watch these two films, basically.
Yeah, I think she's maybe not been forgotten about, but I think she is kind of underrated. And it's just, she's stunning in these films.
Yeah. And I mean, I think for
But
Red
then she's
Hair,
brilliant.
yes,
Yeah.
these two films will really,
Obviously, she does a brilliant scripts to work with.
yeah. I mean, it's a shame that she never done that many more with Pearl Pressburger. Really, I mean, they weren't.
Yeah.
But she was under contract with MGM, so they let her out for this film. So yeah, it's just a wonderful film. It's very. You could see all the actors were challenged by what they had to do because they had to do things that were not the more obvious things. So they had to try and
Yeah.
project interest in people who were not interested in odd ways. They weren't conventional kind of characters. They were just oddball characters, which kind of freed actors up to try things. Because
Yeah.
Pressburger writes characters who are one thing but also something else. There's a duality in them.
Yeah. They must have just said to Kathleen Byron, yeah, just go mad. just let loose.
See all this scenery around here, you tune it.
Yeah. It's just... But then again, one of the most famous things when she goes to David Farrar, his wee hut, his wee love shack,
Yeah.
To profess her love for him, and he's just like, what? It's like, I didn't speak to you, I didn't encourage you, what are you talking about? Then, of course, she faints, and we get that colour in the screen, which Scorsese's ripped off about 20 times since.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing. He doesn't know who she is. She's just someone in the background. He's interested in Deborah Kerr.
Yeah.
She's just some nun they always moan about being a bit weird.
Yeah. But again, if you're psychologically damaged, even if somebody just says something to you, then you put so much weight into it that it's not actually there, or so much inference that's not actually there.
Yeah.
So she goes to his hut and professes, and it's just like, what?
Yeah. No, I remember Sales and Sales were talking about Limbo, and he was saying about the daughter character in Limbo, and he says most of the stuff in that film was just in her head. It's like no one cares. Like anyone should ever talk to anybody who she's got problems with, they say, huh?
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's just in their head. It's characters who have put so much in their head that it's not logical.
Yeah, Catherine Byron's character, Sister Ruth, is certainly not that.
Yeah, she was in her head before she even got there. Like, she was already ripe to go crazy before she got there. And obviously sent her there just to get rid of her because no one wanted to deal with her. It's like, it's your turn to babysit her. We just don't want to deal with her. And she's so bitchy to everybody. It's great. Yeah. She's so nasty and condescending to everybody all the time.
Yeah, within like the first day, she's like, nothing works. There's no water. Everything's broken. It's not going to work. It's just like, take a breath.
Yeah, and then she's teaching the children. She's so mean to them and so condescending to them all the time. Yeah. It's like they're idiots.
I just love the fact she's teaching them the name of weapons.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful.
She treats them like morons, even though they're just both different cultures. She has to be patient and try and show them a new way of doing things. She's no patience with that. It's just to have their idiots. And it's like, no, they're just been brought up differently from you. It's like, what the hell? But she's so condescending. It's hilarious because it's like, this is the worst version of a British teacher that is a stereotype. It's like, this is it.
Yeah. It's a wonderful attitude to foreigners.
Yeah, and it's funny because she's writing in the same room as someone who's the opposite, who's very nice to them and is very nurturing and trying to help them and is very emotional and they all love her. And then there's this basic crazy bitch in the same room and it's like, well, this complete to the two opposites.
I think one of the things that's maybe underrated about both these films is they are funny. There is actually a lot of humour in both the films.
Yeah. I mean, Catherine Byron talking down to the prince repeatedly is hilarious because it's just like, you're insane.
Or even the wonderful scene where, one of the sisters is making coffee. It's like, Deborah Kerr almost lets the facade slip when she's like making faces about it.
Yeah, it's like, is the coffee any good? No.
It's like, no.
It's a great. Yeah. And he tastes it, like, oh.
And then she almost lets her facade slip by smiling back at him. And it's just like,
yeah.
Then she catches herself.
Yeah, no, but she becomes more human as she goes along, as she has to let her defences down.
It's all these memories come walking over.
And I like the fact that she becomes more human. She learns from her mistakes. She moves on. It's not like it is like a learning experience, but she's probably going to make other mistakes. But it's not like a. It's an interesting character because it's not defined as one thing. It's a complicated person. So it's which I like about Pressburger's writing.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a common theme with Pressburger's scripts and why they have aged so well.
Yeah, because the characters, even if they start out seeming like a certain type, you see things that are different from what other writers would do.
And again, writers at that time, lots of characters were one-note characters, basically.
Yeah, especially in British films because they had to be kind of based in the class system. Like you're defined by a class. That's all you are. And then there's writers and directors come out and say, "No, I'm not doing that." I mean, that's the big thing I have got about Hitchcock is a lot of time he does define characters by where they come from, and they don't, unless it's he's working with a good writer who can stretch that. I think sometimes his characters feel very stock. And they're more defined by the perversions than they are by anything else.
So because to me, Hitchcock's not really interested in people, whereas Powell and Pressburger are interested in people.
Yeah. So even if you have a cliched start for a character, they subvert it usually to become much more complicated.
Yeah.
Now, I think Hitchcock, you needed a writer to actually do the characters. Which is why certain films work better. Like Shadow of a Doubt works really well because the characters are interesting. Or Notorious or something. Yeah. Certain ones with the character situations interesting, the characters are interesting, good actors. But if you got the wrong writer, the wrong actor, he would just leave them to be stiff.
Yeah, again, that's probably where there's a parallel between Scorsese and Hitchcock. Scorsese needs a good writer as well.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes he lets writers overindulge, then he overindulges and you get 3 hour films. And it's like, why is this 3 hours so long? Even a good film like something like Wolf of Wall Street, it's like, that's a 2 hour film. Why is it 3 hours?
Yeah, I still haven't seen that one.
Yeah, watch the first 2 hours. They're done. You're fine after that. You'll get most of where it's going. You need to watch the final third where it does everything you expect.
Yeah. I mean, back to both these films, they both have a nice kind of water metaphor at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, halfway through Black Narcissus, David Farrar says, you should all leave, but I'll give you until the rains break. And and then Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, when Candy makes a promise that he won't change until his house is a lake and the flood comes.
Yeah. Which is something you notice when you're watching it, but you notice a lot more when you see it in the projected. It comes across a lot more.
Yeah.
It's just something that lands better when you watch the projected. And just the atmosphere in both those films, just how they move from different locations and everything feels like one world, but everything feels accurate, but also in the person's head in a weird way, like as a metaphor for their head space. Always there is an expressionistic feel to Michael Powell directs. It's not over the top the way it would be in general expressionism, but it's there subtly. So it's not like overdone, it's just there. And if you're intelligent enough, you can pick it up, but if not, you'll feel it.
Yeah, I mean, genius and masterpiece are two of the most overused terms in the film community, but both are perfect for these two films.
Yep. They're just great. I think as you see us do more artist films, we'll just be saying, oh, this is amazing. This is stunning.
Because again, one of the great things about them, if you forget their actual work, is what was going on around them. They were just doing stuff that nobody else was doing. Or maybe one or two people. I'm not an expert in the time, but they just seem to be doing stuff that other people were just not doing.
No, because everyone else is into like more traditional filmmaking and realism, or what they viewed as realism, which was take the cliches of the time and promote it. I mean, because Alien didn't really hit until the 50s, and Hammer didn't hit until the mid-50s, and their style was dominated. And obviously, I've said before, Hammer pretty much is ripping off Powell Pressburger style and doing its horror. I mean, I love Hammer, but I know it's a rip-off of Powell Pressburger.
Yeah.
that's probably why I love it so much. It's like it's a cruder version of something I adore, but I still really enjoy it. You know,
And again, it's probably
the directors who understood that kind of feeling.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the reasons why they perhaps weren't appreciated at their time, just because they were so different from what was going on.
I know, yeah. I mean, it's like obviously, I mean, it took years for them. They were just viewed as films made at that time, but everyone was raving about something else. Probably some other countries' films because the British hate themselves so much.
Yeah, other people were doing gritty post-war stuff, and they were doing musicals and a film version of operas, and
yeah, they were crude populists.
Yeah,
and actually, they're just making art. At a time, they didn't understand art.
Yeah, like, but they were doing it in an unpretentious way. Their films aren't pretentious.
Yeah, I was reading about how Japanese viewed a lot of the gangster films in the 70s, or in the Battle Royale thing they're talking about it. Is basically these were just viewed as gangster films in the 70s. No one thought they were doing anything amazing. And the critics didn't think they were doing amazing, they were just doing gangster films. It's just now you look back and go, God, these are really good. These are really impressive. Because at the time they were just making product. And then you look back and you're like, these are so well made. This is such a good period. Which is what happens normally. It's after the period's over is when you realise what you've lost and what's missing. But that's life. People are stupid.
Yeah, and most great artists are appreciated after the fact.
Yeah, normally you need a bit of distance. People don't like. By the way, the people who are revered as a great artist at the time usually aren't.
Yeah,
because they're the ones that are the obvious ones, and it's like if you're actually being revered as a great artist at the time, 9 times out of 10 it's probably a sign you're not.
Yeah,
I mean,
as there you go.
Even Kubrick was very controversial. You know, he was revered, but he was controversial. I mean, most of them aren't revered.
I mean, as we've said about 27 times before, you know, Cronenberg in 40 years will be viewed as like a genius, whereas he's not. Well, obviously, is in some circles, but in general, he's not really viewed that way.
Yeah, I mean, look at Buñuel. Buñuel was tossed out so many places, and now he's like one of the great surrealist geniuses of the 20th century, and he's still not as well known as he should be.
Yeah,
Melville.
Yeah, I was going to say Melville wasn't really appreciated.
He was just a genre director. It's like, so he's not Goddard who's making these poncy intellectual films. He's just making genre films, which apparently annoyed him. Who's like, no one's appreciating me, and they're appreciating all these younger guys who are making more obvious films. Because it is easier to do what Goddard was doing, which is do a lot of people reading from books and saying how smart you are.
Yeah.
Doing something like Last Samurai is really hard.
Yes.
You know, I like Goddard, but he's a bit up himself sometimes. There's some great films, but there's also some less than great films that were actually kind of quite lazy.
I've got a box set of his that has been in the backlog for some time.
I've got 2 box sets of his. I've really gone absurd.
Yes.
I went through a period of watching his stuff in the 2000s, and there's a lot of good stuff in there, but you always look at it and go, there's a lot of self-indulgence here too. He's an intermittently great director who also made a lot of garbage at the same time. It was like, there was no quality control. It was like, I'm trying something and some of it will work, some of it won't, and we'll see.
But you would probably appreciate it if you bought 100 copies of his box set and just never watched it. You'd be making an artistic statement out of it.
Yeah. But he's retired now, so you don't have to bother. But but I like the kind of weird film directors who don't get appreciated.
Yeah, so the upshot is Black Narcissus and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp are 2 of the greatest films ever made, and that's not even being biased.
That's just objective fact. And we will fight you if you disagree. We will fight you.
Yeah.
Well, Roden will. I won't. I'll watch. But he will fight you.
Yeah. Michael Powell, again, matched with that Pressburger outsider view and just intelligence. that's why their scripts still stand up.
Yeah.
And the films still stand up.
They're amazing. They're just stunningly good. So, I think that's us done, because I think we can only talk about how great they are for so long before it just gets really repetitive.
Yes.
But we hope you enjoyed this Gush Fest.
Yes, and we'll see you again in the future.
If it exists.
If it exists.
Yep. If not, we'll see you in hell.
In the past. Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this.
Bye.